Hello, Stein Voluners. I'm Martin Almud, and I'm the game director of Stellaris.
With the Cherry update, you changed so much in Stellaris as I've rarely seen in a game ever. How hard was this decision and how long the discussions?
So, in terms of how long the discussions were, we actually started talking about this sometime after release.
Yeah.
What basically happened was that after the release and after the first couple of updates, which were just like post-launch support, bug fixing, that sort of thing, we sat down, we looked at the game, and we thought about, okay, which parts of the game do we want to improve and in which manner? What do we want to put our focus? And we made sort of a vague long-term roadmap, which is not to say we will do this here, we will do this here, we will do this here, but rather these are the things we want to address in some sort of order. And we decided we wanted to do an expansion about politics, we wanted to do an expansion about the economy, we wanted to do an expansion about diplomacy, we wanted to do an expansion about war. Mm-hmm. And first we did, of course, Utopia, which was our politics expansion. And then we basically decided, okay, it's time to do the war. The problem is, as we discussed with the release, and the reason we did change a lot of things, we consolidated the FDL type and so on, is that we kept running into these design walls when trying to improve the warfare, and trying to make it more strategic, and trying to make it so it's not just fleets appearing and disappearing, going anywhere, because of these like movement rules and these limitations we had, we really felt that the only way we could do a significant lift to the war mechanics was actually to go in and redo a lot of fundamental things that were preventing that. And I wouldn't say it was an easy decision, certainly not. There was a lot of discussion, and there was a lot of workshops, and there was a lot of attempts to like, okay, can we actually fix this with the current mechanics? And in the end, I was like, no, we really can't. So we decided, okay, we're going to have to do this. We spent a lot of time in early prototyping with these things. We actually started long before we actually started working on the expansion itself. We had people just testing, designing, seeing what worked, seeing what didn't, laying code found work, etc., because of the scope and size of the changes. So I wouldn't say it was an easy decision, but you kind of have why we did it.
Yeah. And are you happy with it now?
Yes, I would say so. I mean, obviously there's still things to be improved, there's still things to be fixed, there's still things that can be polished, but I feel like the fundamentals that we have in place now in terms of how territorial control works, in terms of how the wars work, the fact that, there are fronts that have to be split up, that battles aren't all one, there's just not one big battle and then the war is over. I definitely feel that war is in a much better place than it was before 2.0, and that was the big idea with 2.0.
Yeah. Did you lose or win players with the Cherry decision?
So, both, essentially. We definitely are still we obviously have a giant spike of people playing and it's settled down, but this is completely normal. It's what happens with pretty much every single time we have an expansion release. You get this sort of release curve that looks very much like a regular game release curve. It's a big spike of players, then it drops off and it sort of settles at a higher level than before. We have definitely noticed that some players have left, but I would say that more players have come in and have left, and definitely we also reactivated a lot of old players. I've heard from so many people that were like, well, I tried Stellaris a while ago, I played it, I enjoyed it, but I got frustrated with the war mechanics, and then they come back and they basically love it.
Okay. Let's talk about the victory conditions. At the moment, Stellaris is a game of expansion and the late game of defending, maybe this expansion. Will there be mechanics in the future that will allow a different style of play with another victory condition?
Yes, absolutely. So the thing with the victory conditions is that they were kind of a last-minute addition to the game. It was one of those things where, people really expect this game to have victory conditions, so we sort of threw them in. And
it's new for Paradox games, yeah?
Yeah, there's a lot of things like this with 4X, where this was the first 4X we ever did, this was the first space 4X we ever did, and there was a lot of things we kind of had to learn on the fly. So the victory conditions aren't particularly good because it was something we did sort of last minute. We have a few ideas for how we want to rework them. One idea would be, for instance, to replace it with a more score-based system where you have a certain number of years, and at the end of that, whoever kind of has the highest score wins. Obviously, a score could come from a lot of things, not just territory. It could come from being technologically advanced, being ascended, having a strong economy, etc. So you could win as a fanatic pacifist in just a few systems if you have actually built the strongest and best and coolest empire, so to speak. And you could do that in a lot of different ways than conquer. Another thought we had is to make it more of an individual goal-oriented, where it's not so much victory conditions as you have your own sort of end goal for the civilization. You know, you want to be technologically dominant, or you want to turn into completely biological constructs. You want to leave the galaxy. This sort of thing, where it's not so much you win and everyone else loses as you achieve your goal, and that's sort of the capstone to the game. Unless, of course, you want to continue.
I'm a fan of characters in such games because they give me greater connections with the fate of my faction. There are a lot of characters in Stellaris, but they're a little bit flat in my opinion. What do you think about developing this further?
So I have two minds about this. Like you, I'm also a fan about characters. I love Crusader Kings and the like. And I do think they can add a lot of flavor to a game. I will agree that the Stellaris characters are not as fleshed out as characters could be, certainly. But it's also not necessarily a game about the characters. And if we did a real deep dive on the characters, we could risk sort of changing the focus and scope of the game. It's one of those things where I would probably like to do some more, give them a bit more personality, make them a bit more interesting, but not go too far. Not go all in and try to turn it into Crusader Kings in space, because that's not really what the game is.
Okay. What about the political factions? I think it's great that they came in the game, but at the moment they are mostly for influence or important for the unrest system. I can imagine so many great events that make the mid-game more interesting and the factions more significant. Do you plan anything in this direction?
I think we'll definitely do something more with factions at some point, that we will try to build a bit more on that system. I would also like to add more events and generally try to make them more interesting and a bit more varied depending on the government form. Like, factions could perhaps be more significant in a democracy than in an empire, which could be one thing that differentiates the government types a bit more.
And what about the timeline or logbook for Stellaris, with the events in the history of the faction?
You mean like a event log? So you can see what's happened? This is something we have been talking about, where it would be really good to have sort of at least a history of major events. We're not sure we just want to add one of those text logs that keeps track of everything that we kind of have in our other games, because it's one of those things that we know people ask for, but we also know that very few people ever look at. We have a pretty good understanding that they're virtually always closed. So if we could do it right, and if it could be so that you could, especially at the end of a campaign, go back and look and see the history of Empire, remember, that colony, that war, that leader, that would be great, and definitely something I would like to do. But of course, everything is about, there are so many things I want to do, and there's only so much time and development resources.
Okay, question about the traditions. Currently, you almost finish them all in a long game. Wouldn't it be better if there were more, but some would be mutually exclusive?
So there's a bit of a design philosophy behind the traditions, which is, there is a name for it, but it's something like the philosophy of 7, which is that if you give a player more than 7 choices, they tend to get overwhelmed. Of course, it's a bit simplistic, and it only applies in these cases where you have a direct, obvious thing we have to look at and decide between these. So there's actually a reason we chose there to be 7 tradition trees. And we sort of talked about it, and we should have much more branching paths and so on, and eventually decided we will put those things more into the ascension perks.
Okay.
So that the traditions act as sort of the base things that everyone gets, and it's more about the order. Of course, you don't have to take them all, especially if you have unity ambitions, you can burden that instead. And the ascension perks provide more the branching that you get afterwards from where you want to take your empire.
Okay. What are your big points for the next patches and DLCs? At what can we look forward to?
Of course, we have the Sun Stars coming out in a few days, which is a story pack based on exploration. And then, as I said earlier, we do at some point want to do major expansions about the economy and diplomacy. And I'm not going to reveal which order those will be coming in, but let's just say we have a lot of ideas for things we want to do. Expansions, story packs, we're not nearly done with Stellaris.
Okay, sounds good. What's your personal playstyle? Are you more a role player or a power gamer in Stellaris?
I'm definitely more of a role player. I will occasionally play the power game, but it's more unusual. I prefer to play the game as I have an interesting idea for an empire. Let's see how this goes. And sometimes I will do a really sort of okay, this is a really dumb idea. Like I actually played a campaign where it's stuck to one system.
Yeah.
And so on. And it can be a lot of fun seeing it from that perspective and what happens and how the game actually sort of works. So personally, I tend to play a lot of Spiritualists actually. I enjoy the Psionics a lot. And I kind of tend to alternate between evil conquering empires and one of my other favorites, which is like a xenophile spiritualist build that just sort of pushes ethics onto everyone. Because both these are kind of infectious, where the more diplomacy you have, the more you push the ethics, and you can sort of end up peacefully converting half the galaxy to your holy Mother Gaia religion or whatever you have, your holy Mother Mushroom.
At the end, the most important question, what's up with the space unicorns?
Okay, so the space unicorns, which I have been asked but a number of times.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So the space unicorns are definitely coming. This will be the third major update on Tuesday, after I promised them, and I promised them within 4 major updates.
Okay.
So the deadline is the major update after that.
Okay, all right. So
Before then, or at least on that update, I will have to deliver. So stay tuned.
Thanks for the talk. Thanks
Yes,
for the interview.
thank you.